been a very interesting 3 weeks. And, even with the equities, I'm still looking at the Dow was still up 1/3%. NASDAQ was down at just a touch, 0.1. S&P was relatively flat. But overall, it was, quite a nice week. And that built on that, Santa Claus rally. You can't expect every day to get a 1% or a 2% move to the upside, or a week to do that. So relatively okay. And I think this week could be a reasonable sort of week. We've just got to see how it all rolls, but a fair bit of data coming out.
Indeed. We'll take a look at the daily performance chart here, and we'll focus certainly this week on crude oil, Pete.
Yeah, exactly right, Andrew. There was the meeting was set down for yesterday, and that was postponed. So it was Sunday the 26th, and now it's been postponed to a virtual meeting on the 30th of this month. I think that's about Wednesday or Thursday. And it's virtual. And the issue quite simply is, where does crude roll over the first quarter of 24? Do the Saudis and the Russians continue their cuts or even become more aggressive? Do other African nations fall into that party? It's an interesting dilemma, and we've just got to see how the data drops. Crude's had an incredibly volatile run, and you can see on that chart, a big, relatively massive sell-off. And if you're looking going back to May, it's been an almighty commodity to trade, and that's the attractiveness to traders globally. Andrew, never disappoints.
No, that's true. Yeah, certainly plenty to trade, as you say. So, Pete, what are you looking for then, particularly as we head into next year for those crude prices? Obviously, contingent on what OPEC Plus decides,
Yes.
but also you've got those other factors just in terms of likely global demand.
Well, exactly, Andrew. I mean, this is where it gets interesting, the IEA versus OPEC's numbers, and everyone seems to have an opinion as far as where they see 24. You've only got to look at the export numbers coming out of China and take on board, the global health. It seems to be getting tougher as each month wears on. And I know inflation's coming back, but still the consumer is pretty well tapped out. We want to see how that Friday sale went, Black Friday and over this weekend, to see the strength of the consumer. And then the other side is, if we do see a pullback as far as consumption, then that's going to probably impact the decision-making processes of OPEC even harder. Do they cut more? Or if you see it start to, ratchet back up as far as growth, they naturally want higher prices. And that seems to be the dilemma. But that also feeds in naturally, Andrew, to central bank policy, because that's one of the major concerns to central banks. Do they continue to raise rates if oil prices go up?
Well, indeed. And in fact, further to that, Pete, so clearly speculation about what our own Reserve Bank is going to do when it next meets early next month. Now, we get a key read this week in the CPI data.
Yeah, exactly right. So I think the new governor, she's got her hands full, and just how that number drops. And, you've got to look at the numbers, Andrew. The numbers tell the story, and we're only a month out, less than a month from Christmas. And again, the strength of the consumer. We understand the price of, as far as rents nationally, price of fuel and food. So if it surprises her to the upside, then possibly you might see another rate rise next week. We've just got to see how that all rolls. I think it's a little bit of a toss of the coin at the moment. I don't think the RBNZ is going to raise rates this week, but I feel as though we might be a toss of the coin.
All right, just before we get to what's going on in New Zealand, let's just take a look at how this is playing out, particularly as far as currencies are concerned.
Yeah,
what are you seeing for the Aussie?
Well, I mean, it's had a nice little run up. You can't, I look at it and smile, because it's been, game on. It's nearly at 66 cents, 65.85, and it's had a really solid move to the upside. That US dollar's come under pressure, and you look at those, it's just been an almighty time again to be trading. US dollar sell-off. Other currencies have had a nice move, not so much yen. I mean, it's been range-bound, and even the Swiss franc a little bit rallied with gold. But the likes of the euro, pound, New Zealand and Aussie, if you didn't make a buck trading those in the last week, then maybe it's time to take a break from trading, I think.
All right, okay. Pete, let's just focus on the States, what we're likely to see there. We've got certainly the PCE deflator. That's going to be key this week. Also, we get a read on GDP as well.
Absolutely. So it's a flash GDP, but as far as that PCE is saying, you're looking at around about a 3.5 in October, down from 3.7. So that's a good sign. and we've just got to see whether that materialises. As far as that third quarter GDP estimate for the US, we're slightly higher, around about 5%, up from 4.9 on an annualised basis, Andrew. So it's got a steady clip on. I mean, it's really you can't argue with those sort of numbers. They're very strong. So again, where does the Fed play as far as rate policy moving into the first part of 24? Can't believe the year's nearly over.
Yeah, I know, it catches up with us quickly. Hey, Pete, let's focus on the Eurozone. Look, inflation heading in the right direction, certainly as far as the ECB is concerned.
Yeah, exactly right, Andrew. When you're looking at that harmonised number as far as consumer price forecast, you're lowering down to around about 2.8 in November, down from 2.9. So that's a good sign. And that's one thing that we want to keep an eye on. The core measure strips out volatile items. It'll be expecting around about 4% versus 4.2 in October. So they're healthy numbers in the sense that they're moving in the right direction. And again, we've just got to see what happens as far as ECB policy and whether there's another hike, or is it going to start, ratcheting back as far as rates. They're in a bit of a dilemma as well as far as the slowdown of the economy and also with the inflation. So is it a negative GDP? It's going to be an interesting 24. That's all I'll say.
All right, Pete. So you mentioned New Zealand. The RBN said with its decision this week. What are the expectations there?
I think it's around about 85 or 90% that it won't take a hike up, Andrew, and they'll just sit on their hands. They've had a nice rally to the upside, their Kiwi dollar, in the last week or two. So that's been a strong sign for them. And it's sitting there. We've just got to see what their decisions are. And they hit out of the blocks very, very strongly as far as rate rises when you go back to the start of the cycle. So maybe they might be the first ones to look at a pullback. We've just got to see how they go. Yeah,
and we look at that chart, sir. I mean, once again, inflation heading in the right direction. But I mean, the point made there, Pete, obviously, is the RBN said went hard and went quickly.
Oh yeah, they were aggressive, very much so. They, it was like Usain Bolt out of the blocks. No one could keep with them, and they were very, very strong and very determined. So it could go the other way as well. We might see a pullback as far as their policy statements. And 24 is going to be an incredibly volatile and exciting year. Elections, you name it, that's all on.
Pete, how's the Kiwi dollar performing at the moment then?
It's had a nice rally, Andrew, nearly up the same as that Aussie, around about 3.8% in the last week. And, start to breach that 60 handle. It's probably got a little bit further upside, again, dependent naturally on, where the Fed plays and policy coming out as far as comments from the states. But yeah, the Kiwi dollar's had, it's been, again, game on. If it breaches that 200-day moving average, it could have a nice little rally to the upside, from a technical standpoint. But just at that chart alone, I mean, just the excitement and some of those big washouts that you saw putting back to, that July period. And then it was just that massive big sell-off over a 2-month window or a month and a half window. It was very, very nice to trade to the downside.
Pete, let's round it out with crypto, what we're seeing there. Of course, the focus has been on Bitcoin, given its outperformance just as far as well across all asset classes. It's been the winner this year. Obviously coming off a low base, though. Look, Ethereum also making a move. What are you seeing there?
Yeah, Ethereum's had really nice, solid moves to the upside. It's been strongly bid up, and, you've only got to see it. There's a chart, tells you the story, and very, very strong. So again, this month has been a really exciting month for crypto, and especially when you're looking at this particular, window, how you've broken those moving averages, and that's where traders really get a heartbeat from. They look at the moving averages, they look at all their technicals, and if they line up, it's just, showtime. And that's what's demonstrated on that chart.